And we are live. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, out on the interwebs. My name is James Murua, and welcome to the James Murua Literary LiveStream. I'm really excited today because I'm with some really good guests. I'm with based on how you see us, there's Kat. Is it Thielen or Thielen?
Thielen. In German, it's
Thielen.
Thielen. Yeah,
Yeah, Kat Thielen. And where are you in Berlin, Kat?
I'm in Berlin, right?
Yes. And Ama Dadson, she's based in Accra. She's streaming from Accra, and of course, I'm doing it from Nairobi, Kenya. And what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna read a bit of their profiles. Not all of them. These are really accomplished people. So if I read their whole profiles, we wouldn't have any time. So let's start with Ama. Ama is a founder and CEO of Accor Books Audio Limited, Ghana's first publisher and digital streaming platform for Black/African audiobooks and spoken word. Founded in 2017, she was inspired by her mother, a children's book author who lost her sight to create accessible African audiobooks. She's passionate about opportunities offered by digital reading to combat illiteracy in Africa. Before devoting her work full-time to Accor, she worked at the University of Ghana for a decade and a half in several capacities, including Deputy Director of IT Services. And there's a lot more we'll learn about her. Pat Thielen is the founder and managing director of Zebralution, one of the biggest digital distributors for music and audiobooks in the world. He started his career in a record shop in 1979 and was head of Rough Trade Records and later Zomba Records in Germany, Australia, and Switzerland for over 2 decades, working with acts like New Order and the Smiths to the Backstreet Boys, Britney Spears, and Justin. Wow, that's a really good bunch of people.
It's a broad range.
Yeah,
it's a broad range.
Yes. After the company was sold, he founded Zebralution, the first real digital distribution company in Germany with a worldwide focus. And they were acquired by Warner Music in 2007, and he actually got them back together in 2017 with experienced executives, and he works with big and small audiobook publishers in Germany with a focus on becoming increasingly international. I think that works for what we're trying to do now. Uh, your profiles are really extensive. If I just spend my time talking about them, we'll be here for an hour. Thank you for agreeing to be on the live stream.
Thank you very much for having us.
It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you for inviting
So
us.
let's start with you, Kurt, because you have been in the industry for a bit longer. So a lot of the people who would be listening to this live stream are people who are writers or in the writing industry who hear a lot about audiobooks and they're not sure. Would you like to tell us a little bit about what an audiobook is, how does it come about?
Yeah. An audiobook is normally the reading of a book, which is done by the author himself or by an experienced reader. In many cases, that'll be an actor, somebody who works at a theater or TV or movies. And this is an increasingly important format for literature in many countries. The biggest market is the United States, I guess. Germany is quite big. But as you say, in many countries, it is still fairly new. But it's picking up in many countries, and it's benefited a lot in popularity during the pandemic because people wanted to listen to stuff, not stare at screens all the time, and really find out more about books. And the important thing to understand that it's an own production. It's not obviously like somebody needs to go to a studio, somebody needs to direct it, somebody needs to see that everything is right at the end. But the beauty of it is that the narrative can add another dimension to the book as well. If you have a really good reader, he can really enhance the joy you find in the book. And I think that's an important aspect of it.
I think that's a very, very good recap of what an audiobook is, especially for those of us who really are not into the genre. Ama, I wanted to know about the audiobook on the continent of Africa. Do you want to tell us a little bit about it? Is it been a big thing? Is it a thing?
Still very new, a very new genre in many parts of Africa. In fact, digital reading is still a new genre in many parts of Africa. We are still kind of stuck to our traditional print distribution, and a lot of publishers and authors are yet to, I think, see the full potential that is offered by mobile for getting books in front of people. So it is still new. In Ghana, I started my service actually as a service for the blind. You know, as you said in my introduction, my mother's a writer and an educator. She lost her sight about a decade and a little bit over a decade ago, 12 years ago. And so for her, you know, the printed word was not accessible. And so audiobooks became her life. And she started listening to audiobooks way, way back from when it was books on tape. And of course, it's moved then to DVD, and now it's streaming audio. She has an Audible speaker at home, Alexa speaker. We have Google Home Assistant. I'll tell you some funny stories about some of that later on.
I'm sure.
But it was in looking for books for her. She wanted to read the African classics, books that she loved when she was growing up, new books that I was talking about, and they weren't available. So that was when I said, well, there should be. Let me make audiobooks for the blind. And so initially, I did start off as a service for the blind. And Kurt, when we were talking about the origins of audiobook, I think the actual origins of audiobook were after the World War, wasn't it? World War One, for blind soldiers, when the first recordings were made. And so it's actually a medium that was made for the blind, visually impaired soldiers. And so, but of course, audio is for everyone. And like you in Ghana, many parts of Africa, during COVID, out of school, especially, there was a lot of people at home for a year or two, a lot of young people home, out of school. Reading programs were completely derailed. And that's where I actually began to focus quite a bit on children's audio then, because of trying to get access to books to children who are sitting at home. So yeah, it's a new medium, streaming medium, video, you know, DSTV, Netflix, and streaming music. I'm sure Kurt, you'll talk, are very big in many parts of Africa. So we're trying to be, you know, for books, what Spotify and Boomplay and all these streaming media services are for books. And I think it's coming. Podcasts are on the increase. A lot of young people are listening to podcasts. And so I think the transition is natural to listen to audiobooks as well. So it's a slow process. South Africa, there's a South African audiobook publisher, but on the West Coast, where it's only us publishing audiobooks, on the continent. Yeah.
So, what are some of your success? I mean, who have you published so far?
So we started off in Ghana with Ghanaian writers who are well known. You know, you might have heard of Ama Tedu. Of course, you must have heard of Ama Tedu. We've done one of her books of short stories. We've done our first book actually was, and we were getting into the whole thing of what it takes to create an audiobook, voices, you know, the narration, the studio work. Many of the voice talent that we approached when we got started. Now, I didn't know that then. I thought, oh, film actors and theater actors are automatically suited for audiobook. No, not necessarily. all of the actors that we worked with, except a few, had never read an audiobook before. And so reading is quite different from, I think theater is a little bit closer. So reading is quite
Yeah.
different from broadcasting, for example, and
Mm.
commercials. We had a lot of people coming from voiceover kind of background. We said, this is not a commercial. This is not a voiceover kind of thing.
Mm.
However, we realized that when we talked about storytelling, you're telling a story, that's when people sort of, oh yes, it clicked. And good storytellers, those who can get into the voices, the characters, the narrative of the author, and then just give it out in their own way. I think one of the challenges we've had in Ghana is that most literature is in English. Most of our, literature is done in foreign languages. And so already there's a disconnect. Of course, people grow up in school learning English right from there, but I think even our challenges of speaking English and understanding English and therefore expressing it when you're reading an audiobook has been quite an interesting journey. One of the exciting things for me, though, is that we have very, distinctive, lively African storytelling style, quite
Mm.
different from, actually, a bit different from traditional Western audiobook narration. And I'll come into that a bit later, but I've had some interesting experiences when we did some audiobooks for Hachette Audio, for example, in the US, and they didn't quite agree or understand with how we were coming across with some of it. We had to explain, oh, this is an African book, this is how we would do it. But later on they got to appreciate it. So yeah,
Yeah, I
it's
mean,
mm,
Kurt, I mean, I want to bring you in now. I mean, she's talked about the process of selecting. Do you want to get us into the process? How does it work? Like, the publisher decides they want to do an audiobook, or somebody. What's the process?
Um, that's a process which is changing and has changed a lot over the last few years or last 2 decades, actually, to be honest with you. When you think back maybe to 2005 or something, or 2008, maybe 5% of all books were transferred into audio in the US or maybe in Germany. Nowadays, you have some publishers, especially in the UK, who have an all audio policy. So they transfer every book into an audio version as well. So many more books are now narrated and brought to audio than in the past. And the, obviously, like it depends on the content, and it depends on what the book is about and what genre it is. Like, for instance, in Germany, but as well, I think in the UK or in the US, which are the three biggest market in this moment for audio. Um, Thrillers, crime stories are the most successful genre of all, and there's a big likelihood if somebody writes a quite successful thriller, that there'll be an audio version as well. The same goes for romance. Romantic stuff is very often transferred to audio as well. If you write a non-fiction book about mathematics, that's way more unlikely to be transferred into audio, because to listen to formulas over audio, the reading is probably the better tactic there.
Mm.
Yeah, but it's
Yes.
like it depends on the publisher, and in Germany and in other countries, and it's like with Aku, there are specialized companies for audiobooks. A lot of publishers go on their own now, but a lot of big publishers have an own separate entity for audiobook as well. There's people who know what they're doing with audio, take care of the books. And as I said, like, sometimes it's the authors who read it themselves. But like in all fairness, very often it is better if a professional, somebody who works with language, like a theater actor, takes care of it, because it's like if you have a big book and it's 10 hours or more, it's a very exhausting process. It's like running a marathon. It's really, really quite a challenge to do that. You make a lot of mistakes if you read for such a long time, you know. So you would do that maybe over 3 or 4 days, but it is exhausting, and you start to make more mistakes, which will be corrected later on. But it's something which is way more difficult than people in the first instance think. And I'm sure, Ama, you agree with that, right?
No, absolutely agree. We've had it's been very interesting doing the selection process, and I was talking about my very first book was an anthology of short stories. It was 50 short stories, so I thought, oh, that's a great way to get quite a big pool of talent and get them to try out different stories. And we found out who worked and who didn't work. Some fairly big names in Ghana film that turned out that they weren't really that good at reading. And
Mm.
the genres, it's interesting that you talk about genres. We did novels, African literature, mostly more established authors. So I guess books that were kind of classics, older writers. They certainly didn't have the energy, time to sit in the studio and narrate. So we had to get younger voices to help
Yeah.
interpret the work. Romance was a very funny one for us, which I was surprised at. So we had an interesting book one, and it had quite a few erotic scenes, and my the narrators I had were suddenly all very prudish and we can't read it. And I'm like, what do you mean? It's not about you. It's about, interpreting someone else's work. But they just sort of could not get into it. And that was really interesting to me because I actually had an email from the Romance Writers Association of Africa. I didn't even know that existed. They were very excited when they heard about audiobooks and they said, oh, we'd like to give you some of our titles and all that. And I had to say, okay, well, who am I going to get who can read this, read it beautifully, and make it an enjoyable and genuine experience without feeling uncomfortable themselves. But it was all part of the learning process for the narrators. I was telling them, it's not personal. It's about interpreting someone's work as honestly and authentically as possible. So just take yourselves out of it if you can. And we've been doing some workshops now. For us, it's been very helpful to work with voice talent in the UK and the US, more established, because they've been doing it for a long time and they can give tips to our growing talent of audiobook narrators. So yeah, we've enjoyed it. We really enjoyed. It's a thrill to go into the studio. But the editing work, as you said, at the moment, we're a very small company. I tend to have to go in and do the direction and myself. And I'm actually looking for a creative director, someone who can handle the studio work because, you know, you're going in, you have to make sure your energy levels are the same all the time. Notice when someone is getting tired and making mistakes, give them a break. But at the same time, get them back into it at the same level. It's not as easy as it looks. And we've had some writers, oh, we want to read our own books. So as soon as they do a couple of 10 minutes, they're like, oh, no, 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 no.
It's too much.
Difficult.
I want to.
It's
I know
physically
you've invested. Yeah. I know you invested quite a lot. Like this is a project you, but I'm interested in and Kurt, I'll ask the same question. You show me the money. I mean, like how first of all, how would you make money in an industry like this, and how are the people who are buying the book? How would they get the book? What are the platforms people use?
Do you want to start, Ama, or
Okay.
Please start.
Yes. All right. So for us, when we started off as publishers, just making the audiobooks, and then suddenly realized that, oh, where are we going to sell them? You know. And I did start out with an American company called Libro FM, and I still have they've got a wonderful company. They really want to help independent bookstores to sell audio, and so we had a platform. We had a storefront, I'd say, on their platform, but they only accepted card payments. They had a membership subscription model, which is kind of out of the reach of a lot of young people on the continent. They didn't do mobile money. They didn't want to do mobile money integration. So then the books were then cut off from the people that we wanted to reach. So we realized that we had to become a platform provider as well. And so we're doing got two business models in one. We're a distributor and a platform, and it's internet based, it's app based. So you can go to our internet website and access, listen to books, buy, do everything. And then we also have mobile apps on iOS and Apple. So that's how you can access our books. And ours is fully integrated with mobile money, which is used in Ghana and many parts of Africa. You don't have to have a credit card or use a credit card. So we had to do that. Getting the books themselves from publishers was fairly easy, except that the publisher said, "Yeah, sure, go and do my book," but they would not pay for production in the beginning because they weren't sure of the market, as you're saying, who's going to listen. And so it's been a journey where we're trying to show them that you've got to help grow this new audience, and we paid the production up front for our first few years. We've just got to the stage now where authors and publishers, we do a share of production costs. So the production costs, and then we do a revenue share, of course, with the authors and for royalty. And we distribute on AquaBooks platform, and we also help to push to other platforms that global platforms. Our books are priced according to just the continent prices that books people can afford. So they're usually about a little bit less than the print copy. I know and I think heard in many parts of the world, audiobooks are actually more expensive than the print versions. But we realized that didn't work for us. So we had to make it either on par or a little bit lower just to encourage people to get books. We are now working to, and we got our initial funding from a business award. We're very fortunate to win an African Entrepreneurship Award, which was really excited about what we're doing for making books more accessible. That sort of got us started. We've won a couple of other awards, support from MasterCard Foundation as well. We are not really making revenue yet. What right now our strategy is, we've got a tiny catalog and we need a bigger catalog, because what's happening, I think, these days is that a lot of young people are used to streaming media, YouTube, DSTV, Netflix, Spotify, where they get loads and loads of stuff for free. So, you come to your platform, you've got 100 books. If they don't see the genres they like, they don't see anything interests them, they're gone. So we've just entered into a partnership with MTN in Ayoba. Ayoba is MTN is one of the biggest telcos in West Africa, in Africa. And, yes, and Ayoba is a super app which is dedicated for African content creators. And so we have a channel and a micro app on Ayoba. and we're focusing on growing the audiobook community. So our current paying customer base is like 800 customers. Most of them have done one-off buys. A couple of them have bought a couple of times. But on Ayoba, where we have a channel where we give audiobooks for free, and they also have the advantage of data for free, because that's another thing. In addition to the price of the book, you've got to pay your data charges, which is one of the big barriers. But Ayoba have made their content free on their channel. And all of a sudden, we launched in March last year, and we've got 170,000 listeners.
Wow.
Wow.
And I realized that, okay, that's because it's free. That's because they don't have any data. So we're going to figure out how can we monetize that with a subscription. So right now, our retail, it's paper retail, paper download. Each book you buy, you got to pay for. But we want to move into a subscription model, which is affordable, starting at $3 for one credit. And you can get quite a large pool of books from that credit, all the way up to $9 a month for 4 credits. And we are talking to publishers, the big publishers, for their Black African catalogs to be distributed on our cookbooks, so that we can have a bigger pool of books to give to our listeners. So it's quite exciting. So yes, that where do we make the money? We're not making money now, but we are growing the user base, and then we're trying to figure out how we can find a price point that suits the user base, and so we can start to monetize.
Kurt?
Yeah, we are a distributor. We distribute music, audiobooks, and podcast. So we are an all audio company, and we work with many outlets. I really love Ama's story, because like, to be a publisher and then realize we need to do more, we need to be a platform as well. I absolutely love that entrepreneurship. That's fantastic. I really congratulate you to your decision. That's fantastic. We have many outlets, as I said, and where we made like Audible is the big player in Germany, USA, and UK. They have been very early in the audiobook game. You can do a subscription there, which allows you to buy a book every month for $9 or €9.99, or I think £7.99. So that's price-wise, that brings the original price, which can be very high. If you want to buy a Harry Potter book, it probably costs you $35 or something. I don't know. I don't know exactly. It's just a price I could think of. So that brings down the price substantially and makes it more affordable. And actually, that helped audiobook very much so. Where we came in and made a difference is that already in 2010, we started putting audiobooks on streaming services in the music area. We started with Napster, we work with Deezer, and we work very well with Spotify, which is actually our biggest account. So we put audiobooks on Spotify, so people who have a subscription can listen to them, and we get paid by the number of tracks they listen to, like the music, like in the music world. Actually, but you need to have a subscription, because if you don't have a subscription, there's a shuffle function. So that's not so bad with a music playlist if it's in a different sequence when you originally planned. With an audiobook, that's pretty bad. If you suddenly hear the who is the murderer in the third chapter, that doesn't help you very much with listening to an audiobook. So you need a subscription to be able to really enjoy the audiobook. So which means that we're sure to get paid for this. But we work with all kinds of outlets. We work with Audible, we work with the music-centric services like Spotify and the others. We work with book-centric services where you only get audiobooks like BookBeat and Storytel and Nextory. We work with Apple Books, obviously, which is a good partner for us, and many, many more. We try. Our philosophy clearly is we want to present audiobooks to as many people as possible, and whatever their way of getting audio is, we want to be there, and we want to enable them to be able to listen to audiobooks. And that's like, especially when I think about the music-centric services, the great thing about that is we reach many, many, many young people. Originally, like audiobook was a little bit older. It was very much a thing for commuting, people listening in the car, going to work, going back home. That is all changing. A lot of people are now listening at home, and not even when they're cooking, they're just listening to relax and to enjoy the audiobook as well. So that's a trend which has become really strong, you know. And and our audience we reach with all these things is younger, and it's as well very much female and male equal. Whilst on a lot of the audiobook services, it's many more women listening to audiobooks than men. But through the basis we have, it's way more equal in when it comes to gender as well. So I find that very interesting as well. So, and for us, really reaching young people, reaching out to a new audience for audiobook was really what made it important to us, and what is really successful for us. We see that a lot of people, actually the majority of people, listen to backlist titles, not only to new releases. And I think that's very good. And if they like an author, because when they listen to it, say on Spotify, they can go to the next book by the same author if they like the author, if they like the storytelling. And I think that's a real achievement, and that makes a real difference. And I really like to be able to give audiobooks to where people want to listen to audiobooks, and not like say like there's this one big shop, you need to go there. We have the choice, and we give choice, and that's important, I think.
So we should be able to see you in Ioba anytime soon, sometime soon.
I now that I know about it much more, because like let me be quite honest there. Like I don't know. I know very little about the mobile services and all that in Africa, and I'm really, really keen to learn more about it, because we had to learn all that first in Germany, then in Europe, and then in other parts. And we're now very active. We started being very active in Latin America as well. And I'd be very happy to learn much more about the ways audiobooks take in Africa as well. And I think with Ama, I have the ideal person to teach me on this.
Yeah, we make connections happen here. I'm interested. Yeah, you mentioned Kurt talked about the trends of the type of people who are reading books. Would you like to give us the trends in the space that you're in?
I think it's similar. Younger people, but those were the targets in the first place. You know, the aiding the millennials who already have phones and are watching, used to getting their entertainment and information from their phones. So those were our target, and from the beginning, we were trying to reach those. Um, Older people, not so much. It's very interesting. In Ghana, a couple of years ago, I had an interaction with an association for aged and elderly people who were trying to reach out with services for older people, and went and had an interesting session, talked about audiobooks, played some. didn't get much response. And what I figured out later on was it's the whole dealing with devices and the phones and the app. And, they would literally have, an older person would have to have someone help them out with it. Now, my mom, for example, and I love audio-based services. Alexa makes it so simple. Just say, Alexa, what books do I have in my library? It will tell you. Then you start. So I think audio-based services will be something that would be really helpful in pushing the genre, and we're looking into how we can even do a kind of almost like a librarian audio voice activated librarian service. So for example, I want to know who's writing science fiction from Cameroon, or who are the doing historical romances in Nigeria, or who's doing, what are the hot autobiographies in Kenya. It's really difficult to find that right now. So I think the discoverability makes it harder. People don't know what's out there and how to get it. So we also want to integrate the discoverability features into our platform. That will help with it, because if you don't know what's out there, then you're not going to go and get it. So I think publishers need to work, or they need help to get their titles out there. James, you know of Book Nook. Book Nook is a Ghanaian online bookstore, which is for African books, and they're doing a fabulous job in getting, at least when you go to Book Nook store, you find across all genres what the latest, um, and older title books, African books are. So I think uh, discoverability makes it's a bit of a barrier how to find books, where
So
to
you're talking
find
about discoverability in the audio side or generally?
and even in the but more so in the audio. One, just because, I mean, Kurt, it was interesting to hear your numbers in terms of percentages of books that are converted into audio. In Africa, it's really, really tiny. So it's not a huge number of titles. And a lot of them are stored in platforms that are not accessible to the average African on Audible, So then you can't get to listen to them, you
Yeah.
know. So that there is that challenge of getting people to discover where the books are. That's, I think that's one thing. This year in Ghana, Accra has been awarded the honor of UNESCO's Book Capital of the World. So launching in 2023 April, all the way up to 2024, there's going to be a big focus on literature in Ghana, and the eyes of the world be on all things literary. So we're really going to take a huge opportunity there to push audiobooks and digital reading. We're going to have outdoor read anywhere campaigns where you have QR codes in bus stops, and you can just scan the code and you'll be taken away to listen to an audio story. We're going to have a big campaign to get people more aware of what's available. And I think that's such an important step. We've been so busy trying to get our catalog together, our platform together, but we do need to work. And MTN, I'm happy to say, Ayoba, the channel, is a great way also to get people listening and aware of our titles. And we notice as soon as we drop new content, interest sparks up. So that's important. Oh, there was something you said, Kurt, I think about yeah, I think earlier you said about publishers who have an all audio policy. I mean, that is amazing. I don't know, James, of any African publishers who are, even thinking of a 50% audio policy, more so all audio policy.
Mm.
And I think there's a lot of work to be done in getting publishers abreast of the times. and deciding to do a digital version. It's astonishing the number of people I ask, don't you want to make a digital version of your book? No, you know.
But I
I
think in
want
all fairness,
Mhm.
sorry, go ahead.
Kurt,
Go ahead.
Kurt, please finish your thought.
Mm.
Say
Kurt,
that again.
please finish your thought.
Yeah, I was just going to say, like we find that as well in Latin America. You know, like
Mm.
that the percentages of books which are produced in audio is still fairly small. It's picking up, it's growing,
Mm.
but as well, you know, like it's a new investment because you
Okay.
have to record it, you have to do the
Mm.
production, and that's for especially for smaller publishers still quite a challenge.
Mhm.
And it really needs people like you to guide them and help them and make the right choices to make it worthwhile for them. And I think that's really important. And then you were talking about like how to find books. Like we created an app, especially like there's nearly all German titles on it, if we distribute them or not, um, so that people will find it in the services. And
Mm.
I think that's very important. We have a YouTube channel where people can listen to short pieces of the audiobooks to decide what they would like. We
Mhm.
have playlists within over 600 playlists within Spotify. So to make the audio visible in a way,
Mhm.
searchable, that is another big task,
Yeah.
and that's something we realize is really where we come in with the tools we give to publishers or which we help them to use, and that is really really important as well. It's a long way still, but like, you know, I can only encourage you because I see that what happened in Europe, what's happening in Latin America, audio is something with a very bright future because it's a good medium, it's an interesting medium, and it is very accessible via mobile, for instance, and that's where most of the use happens here in Germany as well. You know, like it's something with a thing people use every day, many times anyway,
Yes.
and
Yes.
that's really important. Like you were talking about your mother, and I see the problem with people who are a bit older. Having said that, you know, like I'm not so young anymore, but it's something. But I'm totally addicted to mobile. I have
Mm.
like everything as a digital subscription you can think of. You know, like it's terrible, but I absolutely love it.
Mm.
But you know, like something like the Echo speakers with Alexa, that's a
Yes.
really great way for people, and I think that'll help a lot of people deal with being lonely, with being on their own. That's something where like, and you like what audiobook is really storytelling.
Mm-hmm.
It brings us back to the time before the printed book somehow, you know.
Mm.
It's like somebody tells you a great story, you know, and you have a chance to listen to it, and that's fantastic, and I'm really really happy that's getting so much appreciation, so much more appreciation now again.
Mm-hmm.
I wanted to. There's something I do on this stream where I ask you if you have any questions of each other. If you have any questions, please think of any. Please, Kurt, what are some of your most popular titles, like in English? And do you have any any from African or Black authors that you would think of off the top of your head?
We mostly, like, our black authors are mostly from Germany, and we have a lot of like, for instance, the guy Musa Okowanga, who is a journalist who lives in Berlin, who writes about his heritage, but as well about like music and football and all that. And I really really love his work. That's one of my favorites. And don't ask me for titles, please, because my memory for names is so bad. You know, I haven't made up a list before, and I'm really bad at that. Um, but like we obviously like in the moment, still the bulk of what we're doing is in German, but we do have a lot of audiobooks in English as well. We started working with the Netherlands, which is a neighboring country, which has a big streaming, like they're really big in music streaming, which is an ideal opportunity for us to work with audiobook publishers. We work with Spanish language as well, and very hopefully, like as I said, when you ask me a question, is like, Ama, when can we talk about how we can work together? Because it's something I really like to do, and as I said, learn from you, because it's different in every country.
Yes.
There's different things you have to think about, and it's something which makes a big difference. Which territory you want to
Oh,
be in, and which, like, even if I think about the music streaming services, everybody knows about Spotify, but the biggest service in France is probably Deezer, because they come from there. And there's other. It's different in many countries. Apple Music is very important in the United States, and in China, there's a lot of differences, and always a lot to learn. And I'd be very keen to talk to you, Ama, about it, and learn more about the way this works in Africa. And I know there's probably very little titles yet, and we've come across that in many countries, but it's something which is worthwhile keeping track on, and working on. And as I said, like, I think seriously, your work is amazing there. You're a real pioneer.
thank you. I have a question about, and this is about to do with licensing,
Mhm.
territory, audiobook rights, and you're on Audible, and then you get that title, and that says pop up, no, this book is not available in your country, and I'm like, well, it's Michelle Obama. Why isn't it available in my country? And this barrier of restriction of so we always go for world rights as much as possible
Yeah.
because it just makes it easier to get it out there to people. Do you have a policy of
It
acquiring
depends.
world distribution only, and
No, actually, we don't, because, like, we have, it starts with the language. If
yeah.
we have German titles, it's Germany, Austria, Switzerland, and some people outside who take an interest. If you work with titles in Dutch, the interest outside of the Netherlands is obviously much less than in the country. Um, but, like, the structure of the publishing business makes it difficult to have world rights
Mm,
because even within the big publishers, there's a US right, and then they have a subsidiary in the
mm,
UK who maybe produce a different version, or
mm,
have the certain territory rights, and then there's a German and a French and a Dutch and a Scandinavian and Italian and maybe African, maybe South American license to an own company or to a third party. Especially with audiobooks, a lot still
mhm,
goes to people who are specialized in it, and
mm,
they then only get rights for certain territories. I'm very surprised about the Michelle Obama thing, though, I have to say, because I think it's Random House audio everywhere, I thought.
mm,
But I don't know. I don't know. But
mm, mm,
it world rights is a different thing. In theory, for many things we have in Germany, we have world rights, but there's only so much interest in the world,
mhm,
in German language. Like, sometimes it's very funny. We have friends at a library service in the United States, which is called Hoopla, and we give them regularly German language titles, which is not a big business for them or for
mm,
us, but it's nice. And they
mhm,
want to offer with service to their customers, so that they be able, if they're German learners or whatever, to listen to German audiobooks, and that's really nice. These things, they are fun. That's a good thing. You know?
So if it wouldn't be, if I wanted to distribute or have some of German African titles, wouldn't be a problem to get them from you to
I
distribute?
don't think so. I don't think so. I don't think so, because we generally have the world rights, but if it's in German, very few people ask us about it
Yeah,
outside of the German
yeah,
language territories. We have some titles in like Musa's title we have in English as well, you know. So that could be interesting for you. But it's the the licensing situation is normally not that bad for these titles. It gets complicated in the English language world, because
English
that's
language.
where, yeah, there's a, because when Australia is a different distributor or different company dealing with it, then it gets very split up often. Yeah.
And it's interesting, one of the things I wanted to do is especially to tackle literacy and in African languages as well. Why do we always have to read a book in another language? We should be able to have it
Absolutely.
in our own as well.
Yeah.
I
And
mean, how has the uptake of the books that you've actually done in African languages?
they love them. They're mostly
Mm.
children's books so far. Love, love, love. They absolutely
Mm.
love them. Parents love them. Children love them. So I think there's an opportunity to do more. Unfortunately, there isn't enough literature, at least not in Ghana, in our local languages. Big problem. But um, just talking about language, so my mom often struggles with Alexa, because she'll tell Alexa, she has a strong Ghanaian accent. She'll ask Alexa something and it will not understand her, and she'll be, going back and forth. Then she'll have to come and ask me or my daughter to come and speak in a British accent or an American accent. And I'm like, why these voice assistants? Why can't they just understand an African accent, a
They're
Ghanaian accent?
supposed to learn. They're
You know,
supposed to learn, but
AI.
that's got me
yeah.
thinking also we need to do some work in producing our own, um, assistants that can understand, understand us easily without having to
Yeah.
go through. I mean, it's funny. She finds it huge fun, and we just sometimes end up just laughing. But she can spend like 10 minutes fighting with Alexa to 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 read her book, and
Yeah.
I don't know that, and I'm sorry, I don't know that, or pick some other book, and she's like, no, this one. Then
Mm.
she'll
But it
call.
happens to me sometimes too, like
It's
that's
just
not exclusive to your mother. Like I try to speak to Alexa sometimes and we don't speak the same language.
mm,
You know?
but but
I'm sure
yeah,
that Alexa is in German.
Yeah, it is. And still, like we sometimes, it's not always easy, but it's
mm,
getting better. It's getting much better. So I hope it will get that. But I have another question to you, Alma, if it's okay, James. Um,
Please.
one experience we made, like we work now in this in Latin America and in Spain, with Spanish language titles. And in my naivety, I thought like, okay, we'll do all this in Spanish. And then I
mm,
found out that people in Argentina speak a very different Spanish
mm,
from people in Colombia or Mexico or Spain, and that people in Latin America often struggle with the Spanish,
mm,
and that Colombian Spanish is supposed to be the most neutral Spanish, which everybody can understand really easily. So it's a really, you get into very specific problems. And you talking about African languages, and I'm sure there's quite a few. Um, how much is that a problem for you, or how do you deal? Do you record in various African languages, or how do you deal with that?
That's what African languages is just crazy. I mean, in Ghana, the number of languages it's just really, really, really difficult. Big challenge. I mean, I think there's sort of 7 major groups, but we have more than 200 plus languages in Ghana.
Yeah.
And so, and even talking English, very interesting. English and French. Ghanaian English is quite different from Nigerian English, And I've often had, one of the things I try to do is very authentic reads. So if I'm doing a Nigerian book, I want it read by a Nigerian narrator, because a lot of the pronunciations are completely different, even though they're speaking English.
Yeah.
And sometimes you won't understand it. You will have to listen a couple of times or whatever. Same with French. It's interesting that you're talking about French. I lived in Ivory Coast. There's a distinct Ivorian French, different intonation, different from Parisian French, but a lot of Ivorians would speak both. Some could speak Parisian French and others would speak the local Ivorian French.
Yeah.
But it's actually really interesting for me, all these different accents and nuances. And if you're reading a typical Ivorian book, you would want to hear the, authenticity of how it's spoken, and the dialogue and all that. You didn't necessarily want to hear Parisian French. And so and then it brings it more closer home. So language is the challenge, but we try to work with the major, most popular languages. And interesting, I even see more opportunity in East Africa, James, where you come, because Kiswahili, there's a lot more going on in literature than we have in Ghana, I think. And so I think if I was doing local, in Nigeria, for example, Hausa, which is spoken quite widely actually across the northern part of West Sub-Saharan Africa, I would start with those kind of languages, then Tree or Fanti or Ga, which is just really restricted to Ghana. So we're looking at, can we pick some titles with languages that would, carry across borders, But we really have a lot of fun working with narrators from different, I've worked with narrators from Nigeria, from South Africa, and from Ivory Coast. And it's just lovely to hear. I just love hearing the different, accents, voices, expressions, and so on. And they also enjoy listening to Ghanaian books as well.
I want to jump in here. You talk about Ivorian. So if I want to listen to some Ivorian, like French, what books do I need to look out for? Because if you said you already worked with some of them, what are some of the things?
Okay, so we, in fact, we I don't know if there's a company called Uscribe. You might have heard of them. It's actually a French audiobook company, which came into Africa about 2019 with the Orange telecom operator, and they launched audiobooks and ebooks. Well, ebooks first and audiobooks in a huge way in Francophone Africa through the Orange Telecom network. It's been hugely successful, but I would say 96% of their titles are French books. Now the French people, I think, have a slightly different. Francophone countries have a slightly different relationship with their, the colony and former colonial people, and so a French audiobook service is working very well in all these countries. So a lot of the titles would be on that platform, but there'll be French books, because a lot of French Francophone people read French authors. But I'm now looking at the African francophones whose books are there, have not been done in audio, and getting them done in audio. I haven't. I've just got a few children's books right now at the moment. I'm working on an autobiography for the footballer Marcel Desailly. You might know Marcel Desailly. His book
yes.
Capitaine.
World champion 1998.
Right.
Yes.
He's got an autobiography Capitaine. Lovely book. And so we're working on that one. That'll be our sort of first major adult title. For the francophone, when you scribe sort of came in on the scene, I was like, okay, let me focus on anglophone Africa, and let's see how they develop. They're doing a fantastic job, and but because I lived in Ivory Coast for so long, and because I had some relationship with writers and so on, I really want to do their books. Uscribe is not an audiobook publisher. It's a bit maybe like a Zebulation. They don't actually do audiobooks themselves. So they just distribute and sell audiobooks. Um, it's been a bit of a challenge working both ends, both business models, and it's in a way slowed us down a little bit. We've just got a new partnership with Beat from Norway. That's a audiobook platform that's going to help us to sort of take over all the technical platform issues, so we can just focus on audiobook production.
So, I mean, we need to wrap up now. We already done our 1 hour.
Already? No.
Yes. Yes, it's so much fun. So, I mean,
Time flies.
I'll just ask you, yeah, I'll just ask you, like, briefly, would you like, because you've been talking about, like, especially for you, Ama, you're actually building the platform. You're the pioneer in your industry, basically. Are you looking forward in a way that this is going to be a big thing, or what are your thoughts? And the same with you, Kurt. I mean, like, you started for a while, so what do you look at the future? How does it look for your industry?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm very excited about what's coming up. One of the exciting things I saw a couple of years ago was interactive storytelling. So you can tell a story or interact with the story, and Alexa change the way the story flows with the voice command. Do you want what do you think is going to happen? Do you want your protagonist to go here and there? And I think that relates a little bit to some of our traditional storytelling forms. So I'm looking at how can we produce some stories in this interactive way, because we have a lot of interactive storytelling. The storyteller is telling the story, and the audience joins in and can change it and can do that. And I'd love to see, how we can package some of those experiences and some original, working with original writers who are writing directly for audio. We have Accra World Book Capital coming up, so we have a whole year to kind of push and promote audio. So we're looking forward to a whole lot of interesting things we're going to be doing there, including an African Audiobook Award that we want to do.
You had it here first.
Like, yes, we want to launch the first one, just celebrating Black audiobooks, African narrators. And a podcast. And so a lot of interesting things are going to happen for us during the year. And so we hope that once with our partnership with Beat taking care of the platform and getting new titles, we want to launch with about 3,000 new titles. We think there'll be something for everyone, and
Wow.
we're excited.
Wow. Kurt?
Yeah, for us, obviously, it's already a big part of our business. We are a company with nearly 100 people working there now, and the audiobook is really important. But I think it's really an exciting time for audio in total. We can see that there's synergies between audiobook and podcast, and I think in the not too far future, You will think about a story and think, is this a podcast? Is this an audiobook? Can I do both? How does that differ? That'll be really, really interesting in terms of how you deal with content, with writing. And as well, I think AI will play a big role in the future because, as we said before, that audiobook production is quite expensive for it's another production. It's a different thing. You have to have people there, and I think for especially for some smaller non-corporate publishers, AI will present a chance. I don't think it already works somehow for non-fiction.
Non-fiction,
It's not great for fiction in my mind, in my opinion, in up to now, but that might change as well and make it more accessible. Although I'm totally convinced that a good narrator will always find enough work to do because it's a different thing. You know, like when you listen to Stephen Fry reading Harry Potter in English, you know, that's like a movie. You know, that's a different thing, that audio. And people like that and productions like that will always find their way to the listeners. But I think for some stuff and for a lot of publishers, it could be very helpful to work with AI. If it develops further and find an audience through that as well, in a more accessible financial way of producing.
Thank you so much, Kurt and Ama. And all of you who've been listening, please have a nice day, have a nice evening, have a nice morning whenever you listen to this, and have a nice one.
Thank you.